National Action Plan and strategy to operationalize the policy has been developed, involving a long-term low-carbon strategy, a national adaptation plan, nationally appropriate mitigation actions, identification of technologies, plan for knowledge management, capacity development, education and public awareness, and a financial mechanism. These commitments are further anchored on our development policies through Vision 2036. We strive for society that is sustainable, climate resilient, and whose development follows a low-carbon development path in pursuit of prosperity for all. As part of our commitment to the Paris Agreement, Botswana has also communicated its nationally determined contributions through which it intends to achieve overall emissions reduction of 15%, through which it extended to achieve an overall emissions reduction by 2030. Our role as Botswana Parliament, therefore, is to strengthen governance and policy and enhance implementation towards transformative climate resilient developments, and Botswana Parliament provides an oversight role for realization of policy response measures. In that regard, we have established a portfolio committee on wildlife, natural resources, climate change, and special select committee on SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, I must also, however, indicate that transitional capacities are needed within Parliament to include dedicated resource and capacity committees, as well as their increased involvement in the climate change negotiation platform. One of our key developments in that regard has been climate establishment of Parliamentary Committee of Women, which continues to provide a gender lens into our development agenda, including climate change mitigation. Distinguished guests, similarly, the newly established International Subsidiary Standards Board, which aims to provide a worldwide baseline for climate and environmental, social, and governance disclosure standards, will be a critical step in improving climate smart investing decision-making. Targeted not to be ensure reduction in emissions, but also ensure that our governments maintain their aim to meet the Paris Agreement's temperature objective at a faster rate in order to combat climate change. We need to intensify our actions and investments needed for a substantial low-carbon future and equitable developments globally. We need parliaments to increase participation in negotiations at regional and international fora. The Botswana economy is primarily anchored on mining and agriculture. The diamonds and beef sectors in particular mean a lot to Botswana and are most energy and water intensive. We therefore require better production technologies, funding, water, energy efficient and climate friendly production in order to achieve development agendas. It is therefore to mobilize our stakeholders to change rules, attitudes, and behavior for achievement of suitable developments. Mr. President, in conclusion, I take this opportunity to call on parliaments to ensure they maintain valuable partners, they remain valuable partners at the forefront to achieve sustainable development for all because of the constitutional advantage they have and they enjoy through lawmaking, overseeing government policies and programs, enacting and scrutinizing government budgets, and responding to views of their constituents. As parliaments, we have the responsibility to shape national climate policies, drive equitable and sustainable development, and fill the important gaps at global, national, and local levels. It remains crucial that parliamentarians are capacitated on issues of climate change to catalyze the process. I thank you, all members, for your attention.
Thank you. الآن أدعو جمهورية مصر رئيس مجلس النواب المصري فليتفضل. والمتحدث الذي يليه غينيا بيساو.
معالي السيد دوارتي باتشيكو رئيس الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، معالي السيد مارتن شونغونغ الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، أصحاب المعالي رؤساء البرلمانات ورؤساء الوفود البرلمانية المشاركين، السيدات والسادة الحضور، أود في مستهل حديثي إليكم أن أعرب عن خالص تقديري وعظيم الامتنان إلى الأصدقاء في البرلمان الأندونيسي على جهودهم المقدرة وما لمسناه من حفاوة بالغة وحسن تنظيم. الحضور الكريم، ليس من المبالغة القول بأن ظاهرة تغير المناخ تعد التهديد الأكبر الذي يترتب عليه آثار كارثية على المجتمعات البشرية والنظم البيئية والأيكولوجية، وهو ما يحتم على المجتمع الدولي بذل جهود حثيثة والتحلي بإرادة جادة وصادقة لمجابهة تلك الظاهرة عبر الحد من الانبعاثات باعتباره هدفاً عالمياً من أجل إنقاذ العالم من أخطار تغير المناخ. الزميلات العزيزات والزملاء الأعزاء، لقد أولت الدولة المصرية اهتماماً خاصاً بقضية تغير المناخ، وضعت خلاله التكيف مع التغيرات المناخية كأولوية رئيسية، وهو ما جعل الخطاب المصري تجاه تلك الظاهرة في مختلف المحافل العالمية يرتكز بالأساس على المسؤولية المشتركة لدول العالم في إنقاذ كوكب الأرض. وفي هذا الإطار انتهجت الدولة المصرية خطاً شاملاً تمضي فيه مجهوداتها الوطنية في مواجهة تلك الظاهرة، إلى جانب الانخراط الإيجابي والمكثف في كافة الأنشطة العالمية لمواجهة تلك الظاهرة. فعلى الصعيد الوطني عمدت الدولة المصرية إلى مراجعة التشريعات والقوانين الخاصة بالبيئة ووضع السياسات الكفيلة بمجابهة التغيرات المناخية عبر رؤية وطنية شاملة استهدفت وضع قضية التحول إلى الاقتصاد الأخضر في مقدمة الأولويات المصرية في إطار الاستراتيجية التنموية المصرية 2030. كما أطلقت مصر على هامش مشاركتها في أعمال الدورة 26 لمؤتمر الدول الأطراف في اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لتغير المناخ بجلاسكو الاستراتيجية الوطنية لتغير المناخ 2050، والتي تسعى لتحقيق أهداف رئيسية تتمثل في تحقيق نمو اقتصادي مستدام وخفض الانبعاثات في مختلف القطاعات وزيادة حصة مصادر الطاقة المتجددة والبديلة في مزيج الطاقة وتعظيم كفاءتها، بالإضافة إلى العمل على تعزيز البحث العلمي ونقل التكنولوجيا وإدارة المعرفة والوعي لمكافحة تغير المناخ وتحسين حوكمة وإدارة العمل في مجال تغير المناخ. وعلى الصعيد الدولي حرصت مصر على الانخراط الإيجابي والبناء في كافة المشاورات والاتفاقيات الدولية لمواجهة ظاهرة تغير المناخ، وترتكز الرؤية المصرية في هذا الإطار على المسؤولية المشتركة لكافة الدول عن مواجهة آثار التغيرات المناخية مع تفاوت الأعباء المترتبة على ذلك بين الدول المتقدمة والنامية. فمع الأهمية القصوى لتضافر الجهود الرامية للحد من انبعاث الغازات المتسببة في ارتفاع درجة حرارة الأرض والتسبب في تغير المناخ، إلا أنه ينبغي أيضاً إيلاء اهتمام كافي بالشق الخاص بالتكيف مع التغيرات المناخية والتي ألحقت أضراراً جسيمة بالدول النامية على مدار العقود الماضية بشكل أكبر من الدول المتقدمة نظراً لضعف القدرات المالية والفنية والتكنولوجية للدول النامية. كما يأتي استضافة مصر للدورة 27 لمؤتمر الدول الأطراف في اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة لتغير المناخ COP 27 هذا العام ليمثل برهاناً على الإرادة المصرية الصادقة والجادة في بلورة جهد قانوني دولي منظم وعادل في مواجهة ظاهرة التغيرات المناخية. السيدات والسادة الحضور، إننا كبرلمانيين مدعوين أكثر من أي وقت مضى لحشد جهودنا البرلمانية باتجاه دعم مكافحة التغيرات المناخية سواء على أصعدتنا الوطنية أو في إطار محافلنا البرلمانية العالمية، وذلك عبر عدة آليات أبرزها إلزام الحكومات بتقديم تقارير دورية للبرلمانات بشأن ما تحرزه من تقدم بشأن مواجهة تغير المناخ، فضلاً عن العمل على تحقيق توافق أكبر بين التشريعات والسياسات ذات الصلة بمكافحة تلك الظاهرة الخطيرة بما يضمن تناسق الجهود الوطنية البرلمانية والحكومية في هذا الشأن، إذ أننا لا نتحمل مسؤولية أجيالنا فقط وإنما نرفع عن كاهل الأجيال القادمة هذا الخطر المخيف. وفي الختام أتمنى لأعمال اجتماعاتنا كل التوفيق والسداد، وأشكر حضراتكم شكراً جزيلاً على حسن الاستماع.
شكرا. والآن أدعو تايلاند بسبب عدم وجود غينيا بيساو، والمتحدث الذي يليه الكويت. وأرجو من الإخوة المتحدثين أن نلتزم بالوقت حتى يتمكن الجميع من أخذ فرصته اليوم.
Mr. President, honorable delegates, distinguished participants, right now as we speak here in Bali, the adverse impacts of climate change are becoming more evident and affecting the lives and livelihoods of people around the world, which demands urgent global actions. Thailand thus wishes to commend Indonesia, our host parliament, for reminding us not to let the COVID pandemic overshadow this pressing challenge of humanity, and our mission to curb the rising global temperature, which remains at the top of the IPU's priority list. As one of the world's top 10 countries most affected by the long-term impacts of climate change, and one of the first group of parties to join the Paris Agreement in 2015, Thailand is making a good progress in fulfilling our commitments to achieve the goals and objectives of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. Aside from our success in reducing 17% of our emissions in the energy and transport sectors in 2020, meeting our nationally appropriate mitigation action, or NAMA, target, Thailand will take further steps to address climate change. At the 26th session of the Conference of Paris to the UNFCCC, or COP26. In Glasgow last November, the Prime Minister of Thailand announced our new ambitions to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 and net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2065. Guided by Biocircular Green, or BCG, economy model, Thailand will continue to prioritize circular economic system at a faster pace and pursue a greener, digitally driven, and low-carbon path to development by rolling out measures and policies that help the world attain global net zero by 2050. We will push ahead with restructuring the energy industry and focusing on climate-smart infrastructure to accommodate the clean and renewable energy transition trend and greening the financial system through the ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program, as well as optimizing energy consumption through innovation and using next-generation technologies for electric vehicle production as part of Thailand 4.0 National Development Strategy. Mr. President, in keeping with Thailand's pledge made at COP26 summit, the Parliament of Thailand stands ready to help strengthen the country's climate action. Therefore, I am personally pleased to inform you that Thailand is now in the process of preparing the country's first ever dedicated Climate Change Act, which includes obligations for the private sector to report their GHG emissions to the National Greenhouse Gas Inventory, while stipulating administrative fines for failure to report such emissions. This legislation would prompt our private sector to start aligning their way of doing business with the country's climate targets. The draft act is expected to go through nationwide public hearings and tabled to the Parliament later this year. To keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius target within reach, Thailand would like to emphasize the need for capacity building, technology transfer, and financial support to assist developing countries in accelerating their mitigation efforts. We are confident that with enhanced support on and access to climate finance and necessary low-carbon technology, Thailand can increase our nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, to 40% and achieve our net zero even before 2065. Mr. President, I wish to close by reiterating that we must turn this COVID-19 crisis into an opportunity. Let us make every effort to recover better and greener by creating more balanced, low carbon, and climate resilient societies and economies that benefit everyone. As the stakes have never been higher and we have little time left to enhance our climate actions, parliamentarians across the globe need to work together to intensify our actions to tackle the climate emergency and achieve the goals and objectives of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement at the earliest opportunities. This is an ultimate war that humanity can join hands to fight against global warming, our common enemy, and protect the blue planet, our only home and the future of our next generations. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you. أدعو الآن دولة الكويت والمتحدث الذي يليه دولة أفغانستان.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. معالي الأخت بوان ماهاراني رئيسة مجلس النواب في جمهورية إندونيسيا الصديقة، معالي الأخ دوارتي باتشيكو رئيس الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، معالي الأخ مارتن تشونغ غونغ الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة رؤساء البرلمانات ورؤساء الوفود البرلمانية، الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية شكرا على اختيار ملف التغير المناخي والاحتباس الحراري موضوعا للمناقشة العامة لهذه الدورة. إن أهمية هذا الاختيار لا تكمن في حيثيات الملف ذاته بقدر ما تمثله من نموذج للقضايا والأولويات التي يجب أن يتعاطى معها العالم بأسره. وعندما أقول نموذج فأنا أعني تلك المواصفات التي تنطوي عليها تلك القضية، وأهم تلك المواصفات هي عالمية القضية، أي كونها قضية جامعة عابرة للقارات وغير محصورة في إقليم أو منطقة ما من العالم. نحن هنا لا نتحدث عن ملف الفقر أو المجاعات أو التصحر أو حقوق المرأة السياسية مثلا كقضايا حصرية بمناطق وأقاليم ما، بل نتحدث عن قضية تلقي بظلالها وتهديداتها ومآلاتها على كل العالم بأسره. ولن أحتاج عندما أقول عالمية أن أذكر بجائحة كوفيد-19 الذي كشف هشاشة العالم وتشظيه، وكشف فيما كشف خاصة في الأيام الأولى كل أنواع الأنانيات القطرية والمخاوف المتبادلة وسياسات العزل والإغلاق، لدرجة شهدنا فيها كل الممارسات التي تنطوي على الاستئثار وقرصنة اللقاحات وصفقات تحت الطاولة لتأمين الحماية والوقاية، وبشكل هستيري ينطوي على كل النزعات التي اتسمت بالتشكك والأنانية وانعدام كل التضامنات الإنسانية. الأخوة الحضور، نحن أمام معضلة دائمة، خاصة عندما نتعاطى مع قضايا كالتغير المناخي، وهي إن الإنسان لا يتحرك إلا إذا وقعت الكارثة. وكان العالم يظن أن الترتيبات العالمية التي تمت بعد الحرب الكونية الثانية وصدرت من الأمم المتحدة ومنظمات عالمية ملحقة واتفاقيات ومعاهدات حقوقية ذات صبغة إلزامية قانونيا وأخلاقيا، كان يظن أنها ساهمت في إشعار العالم بأن حربا عالمية ثالثة لن تقع، وأن هذا الأمر هو خط أحمر لن يسمح به العالم. لكننا كنا نفشل دائما. لقد كانت الحرب الباردة وحروب الوكالة في كل مناطق العالم شاهدا على أن الخطر ماثلا دائما، من الحرب الكورية وفيتنام وخليج الخنازير وربيع براغ وأفغانستان وأنغولا وغيرها، والعالم يشهد تلك الحروب التي جميعها كان يمكن تفاديها. وها نحن الآن وبعد 77 عاما من انتهاء الحرب الكونية الثانية نشهد مواجهة عسكرية مؤسفة بين روسيا وأوكرانيا، ونسمع مرة أخرى كلمات مثل نووية وكيميائية وحرب عالمية ثالثة، كلمات يفترض أنها أصبحت جزءا من التاريخ لا تستخدم إلا على سبيل الردع والتهديد. إنما يحدث دليل آخر على هشاشة الترتيبات العالمية ودافع قوي على ضرورة أن ينتبه العالم إلى خطورة ممارسات الإنسان الذي يدعي التحضر والتمدن وحصانته من التهور واللعب بالنار. إن أهمية ملف التغير المناخي تكمن في هذا البعد، عالميته وخطورته وما ينطوي عليه من تهديد، وهو تهديد شامل لكل البشر باختلاف أقاليمهم وأديانهم وأعراقهم. والأهمية الأخرى تكمن في أن الإنسان لا يريد أن يتحرك إلا بعد أن تقع المصيبة والكارثة، وحينها يكون الوقت قد تأخر. ولأن العالم صغير جدا فليس هناك قضية إقليمية أو حصرية. إن مجاعة في قلب أفريقيا هي تهديد لشمال أوروبا وأمريكا وشرق آسيا ولو بعد حين، وأزمة اقتصادية في أقصى الشرق هي أزمة لكل أسواق العالم، ووباء في أمريكا اللاتينية هو تهديد للصحة العامة في العالم القديم، تماما مثلما احتلال غاصب وممارسات غير إنسانية كتلك التي يقوم بها نظام كالنظام الصهيوني في فلسطين هي جرح مفتوح وتقويض للسلم والأمن الدوليين في كل قارات العالم. الأخوات والأخوة، لا أحد محصن في هذا العالم، ولا أحد بمنأى عن أي كارثة وإن بدت إقليمية أو مناطقية. كنا في السنوات السابقة نتحدث عن الإرهاب، وكنت أقول في مثل هذه المؤتمرات لا أحد بمنأى عن الإرهاب، وإن انفجاراً في بغداد أو القاهرة أو كابول سيسمع دويه في بروكسل وباريس ولندن. لم يكن ذلك تهديداً بل تحذيراً وتذكيراً بصغر هذا العالم وترابطه في عصر التواصل والتكنولوجيا. وأمام كل القضايا التي نناقشها هناك قاسم مشترك، وهو أن علينا العمل الآن، اليوم وليس غداً، عاجلاً لا آجلاً. شكراً على حسن الاستماع، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا. أدعو الآن دولة أفغانستان الإسلامية والمتحدث الذي يليه مملكة البحرين.
به نام خداوند بزرگ، جناب رئیس و شنوندگان محترم، نخست اجازه بدهید که سرمانندترین سلام ها و تمنیات نیک خویش و ملت رنجیده افغانستان را حضور شما تقدیم بدارم. متاسفانه بعد از 7 ماه تسلط طالبان در افغانستان، تعهدات آنها با جامعه جهانی از قبیل ایجاد حکومت همه‌شمول، آزادی بیان، آزادی مطبوعات، حقوق خانم‌ها نه تنها که عملی نشده، بلکه در این مدت محدودیت‌های بیشتری نیز وضع گردیده است. شما خود در جریان هستید که میزان فقر، بیکاری به اوج خود رسیده. مردم حاضر به فروش فرزندانشان گردیدند. گراف جرایم جنایی و اختطاف همه روزه روند سودی خود را طی می کند. عفو عمومی آنچنان که گفته می شود عملی نگردیده است و شما خود شاهد محاکم صحرایی جوانان و نیروهای دفاعی و امنیتی ازبق هستید. آزادی بیان که یکی از دستاوردهای 20 سال اخیر مردم افغانستان در تشریک مسائل جامعه جهانی بود، دیگر وجود ندارد. اکثریت رسانه‌های محلی و ملی یا مسدود گردیده و یا سانسور می شوند و صدها ژورنالیست طبقه ذکور و اناث شغل خود را دست دادند. خانم‌ها از ابتدایی ترین حقوق خود مانند کار، تحصیل محروم شده و اکثریت کارمندان حکومت پیشین یا برکنار گردیده و یا هم حقوق امتیازات خویش را در این مدت دریافت نکردند. حریم خصوصی مردم احترام گذاشته نمی شود و در مناطق خاص تلاشی خانه به خانه که انگیزه سیاسی دارد جریان دارد. ضمن قدردانی از کمک‌های بشردوستانه جامعه جهانی در این مدت قابل یادآوری می‌دانم که تا جایی که من و همکارانم در جریان هستیم، این کمک‌ها در اکثر موارد به مستحقین توزیع نمی‌گردد. بحران مهاجرت هنوز کماکان ادامه دارد. طبق آمار غیر رسمی حدود 600 تا 700 هزار نفر تنها در کشورهای همسایه افغانستان در این مدت مهاجرت نمودند. و صدها هزار نفر دیگر در انتظار بیرون شدن از افغانستان هستند. من و همکارانم همه در داخل کشور با مردم در تماس بوده و وضعیت را از نزدیک نظارت میکنیم. من یک بار دیگر از همین طریق میخواهم خاطر نشان سازم که تنها راه حل بیرون رفت از وضعیت موجوده تشکیل حکومت همشمول و نظام مردم سالار، اشراک هم اقوام در بدنه قدرت، از بین بردن تبعیض قومی، لسانی، سمتی و احترام به حقوق زنان و آزادی بیان می باشد. بنابراین شما و جامعه جهانی تقاضامندم تا جهت تحقق این اهداف مردم افغانستان را مانند همیشه قاطعانه در این راستا حمایت نمایید. تشکر از توجه شما.
شكرا. أدعو الآن مملكة البحرين للحديث، وجيبوتي غير موجود، سيكون المتحدث الذي يليه جنوب أفريقيا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، رؤساء البرلمانات والوفود، الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. لقد كان جديراً بهذا الاجتماع أن يقام في جزيرة بالي الجميلة بطبيعتها، لتكون مثالاً حياً للفعاليات المنشودة في هذا الاجتماع الذي يضعنا أمام مسؤولية الخروج برؤية فعالة أزاءت متغيرات المناخية المتسارعة، وحتى نتمكن من الحفاظ على هذا الكوكب من الانفلات البيئي الذي ينذر بكوارث يصعب التنبؤ بمداها. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، لقد أضحى تغيير المناخ واحداً من أخطر التحديات التي تهدد مستقبل البشرية، وأصبحت المعالجة والتصدي للمشاكل التي يولدها مطلباً دولياً ملحاً وعاجلاً، خاصة في ظل تزايد الظواهر المناخية المتطرفة والتي تنقدح بشكل يومي في مناطق مختلفة من الأرض وبنحو غير مسبوق، حيث خلفت أكثر من 20 مليون لاجئاً مناخي في العالم، وإن عداد المتضررين من أفراد ومناطق سيظل يلقي بمؤثراته نحو التزايد المضطرد إذا لم تتداعى البرلمانات والحكومات والهيئات المتخصصة والشركات والأفراد لوضع تدابير وآليات تكبح التسارع في التغيير المناخي. وفي هذه اللحظة التي أتحدث معكم فيها، قد تكون أكثر من بقعة في الأرض تواجه صعوبات بيئية من سيول أو جفاف أو عواصف أو ارتفاع حاد في درجة الحرارة أو اختلال لموازين البيئة كما يحصل في القطب الشمالي. والنتائج التي تلوح في الأفق تنذر باتساع الكوارث الطبيعية والظواهر المناخية العنيفة التي تسبب المزيد من النازحين، ولم نتمكن من الوقوف أمام ذلك كله إلا بوجود إرادة دولية جامعة وتدابير حازمة وفورية وتحول جذري في الآليات والسلوك البشري لكبح المعدلات الهائلة من انبعاث الغازات والاحتباس الحراري الذي يضع الأمن الاقتصادي والغذائي والمائي والصحي العالمي على المحك. ولا شك أن برلمانات العالم بحاجة اليوم أكثر من أي وقت مضى لأن تتحد وتتحرك في سياق موحد لتجاوز التحديات البيئية التي نلامس حساسيتها بمقاربتها مع ما نشهده من آثار وأضرار واسعة تركتها جائحة كورونا، وما خلفته من تبعات جسيمة قد تشكل في مجملها جزءاً بسيطاً مقارنة بما قد تحدثه المتغيرات المناخية من ظواهر كارثية في الكوكب والمجتمعات الإنسانية. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، إذا لم نستطع اليوم كبرلمانات وحكومات ومنظمات أن نعمل على صياغة توجه عالمي جاد وإيجاد تدابير طارئة، فقد نضطر مستقبلاً للبحث عن إقامة مدن صديقة للنازحين بفعل الظواهر المناخية، خاصة بعد الصرخة التي أطلقتها الأمم المتحدة والتي أنذرت من تغيرات مدمرة في كوكب الأرض خلال العقود القليلة القادمة، حيث يبقى الرهان على تجاوز تلك التهديدات في تغيير السلوك البشري. ومن الحتمي إننا كبرلمانات يقع على عاتقنا إدماج التكيف مع تغيير المناخ في صلب برامجنا المستقبلية، وأن ندفع لتوفر المزيد من موارد التمويل لتحسين قدرة الحكومات في التعاطي الفعال مع أزمة المناخ، كما يستدعي الواقع أن نستحث الجهود للقيام بالدور الحاسم لكبح آثار الأزمة عبر دعم التوسع في أنماط الأنشطة الاقتصادية الأقل إضراراً بالبيئة، وتشجيع الاقتصاد الأخضر، وتحفيز أنماط الإنتاج والاستهلاك المستدامة التي تضع المعايير البيئية في مقدمة أولوياتها، وذلك عن طريق تحفيز مؤسسات القطاع الخاص للتحرك في إطار الاستهلاك والإنتاج المستدام والتوسع في استخدام مصادر الطاقة المتجددة وتقديم الحوافز المختلفة لذلك التحول. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، لقد كان الحضور العالمي الحاشد في مؤتمر الدول الأطراف 26 في غلاسكو أواخر العام الماضي والوثيقة التي تمخضت عنه مؤشراً للأهمية الفائقة التي ينبغي أن يوليها المجتمع الدولي لهذه القضية. ولقد كانت مملكة البحرين حاضرة في هذا الحدث بوفد رفيع المستوى برئاسة صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير سلمان بن حمد آل خليفة ولي العهد رئيس مجلس الوزراء حفظه الله، حيث أعلنت دعمها للمبادرة الدولية في مجال تغيير المناخ. وتشارك مملكة البحرين وتنفيذاً للتوجيهات السامية لحضرة صاحب الجلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى آل خليفة عاهل البلاد المفدى حفظه الله ورعاه المجتمع الدولي اهتمامه بتوفير بيئة آمنة للبشرية، فقد قامت بإدماج أهداف تغيير المناخ والرؤية الاقتصادية للمملكة 2030
change and the 2030 vision and the program of our state are actually testimony of the importance that we give to this issue. And also we have put in place different strategies and policies, especially the High Council of the Environment and the Agency of Sustainable Energy, and also a special delegate in the environment, and the promulgation of different laws and bills as an implementation of COP26. And we also concentrated on raising awareness and building capacity in all the fields that relate to the environment. And the Kingdom also has ratified the Paris Agreement of 2016 that included the different, which had included all the different standards that relates to the climate change in our policies. And Bahrain has put in place different policies by implementing different projects, especially the renewable energy project and the adoption of the best practices in order to implement the SDGs, mainly in the field of gas emission, and also the national campaign of planting trees and the slogan Forever Green, and under the leadership of the princes. That is one of the most important initiatives in this field, and we hope that we will come out of this meeting with a good vision and a possibility to achieve the zero emission by mobilizing different parliaments in order to make a better change of our climate. And God bless everybody.
شكرا.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to call on the Republic of South Africa to take the floor. After that, we'll hear from the Republic of Malta.
Honorable President of the IPU, Mr. Duarte Poshako, the Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Indonesia, our host, Chairperson, Honorable Presiding Officers, Honorable Members, and distinguished guests. Your Excellency, Madam President of Indonesia in absentia, it is an honor and privilege for me and the people of the Republic of South Africa to be afforded this prestigious opportunity to contribute to the debate of such important theme of the 144th IPU Assembly, Getting to Zero, Mobilizing Parliaments to Act on Climate Change. On behalf of the delegation of South Africa, I wish to express our sincere appreciation for the kind and warm welcome we have received in this beautiful country since our arrival. It will be amiss of me, Chairperson, not to mention that in 1961, on this day in South Africa, 69 people were mowed down by the racist regime, and that day has since become the Human Rights Day in South Africa. So today, South Africa is commemorating its Human Rights Day. The 144th plenary session takes place against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic and conflicts across the world that continue to claim the lives of innocent people. Tackling climate change has far-reaching implications for socio-economic development, for production and consumption patterns. Your Excellency, the Chair, the theme of our debate enjoins us to reflect on the question of climate change and the need to mobilize parliaments to act swiftly in reducing its negative effects. We wish to confirm that the Republic of South Africa welcomes the outcome of the concluded Glasgow Climate Change Conference, which calls upon the international community to rally behind a shared objective to inject a greater sense of urgency on the basis of international equity and the latest available science. In our country, we support the government's view articulated by our President on the green recovery for our country. It is our view, Chairperson, that the Rome COP26 legislative prescript can and must safeguard the planet's ecosystems, reduce emissions of greenhouse gases, and limit global temperature increases. In this instance, we call on high-income countries to step up and take responsibility, given the fact that they continue to benefit from the use of fossil fuels. There is still a lack of clear commitment to phasing out fossil fuels by 2050 by some of the key development countries, and there is a lack of clarity on outstanding financial commitments by developed countries on previous gatherings where we feel that they simply don't walk the talk. It may be politically correct for world leaders to make certain statements, but ultimately it is about establishing trust. Trust is important because as developing countries, we come from a situation where all are still caught up in the devastation that was caused by, in our national budget, by the COVID-19 pandemic. As it has been with climate change, developed countries were saying a lot of things about assistance coming to the developing countries, yet there are mounting concerns about vaccine hoarding, which has a negative impact on relationships of trust. We expect developed countries which build their economies on coal to assist us now to put fossil fuels aside, justly so. South Africa has revised its NDCs by committing ourselves to more ambitious greenhouse gas emissions targets by 2030. This includes the phasing out of between 8 to 10 coal-fired power stations. It is in this regard that we appreciate the partnership on just transition, where international partners have committed funds for South Africa's just energy transition. We as parliamentarians have keen interest in this, and we will play an active oversight role to see what the elements of this agreement are. However, our position as a country is not to wait on the international community and developed countries to make commitments before we start with the implementation of what is in our National Development Plan and also in our Green Recovery Plan. We have now started processing the National Climate Change Bill in Parliament, and parliamentarians will have to ensure sufficient and effective public participation process so that all voices of South Africans can be heard. The just transition is crucial in ensuring that nobody is left behind. As I conclude, Chair, South Africa's main priorities remain focused on securing an ambitious progressive finance and adaptation package to support the African agenda and other developing countries to alleviate the negative impact of climate change. It is worth mentioning that the manner in which climate change affects us depends on where we are located on the global map. As it could be expected, the hardest hit population groups are poor people. These are in the main inhabitants of developing countries who are predominantly farmers who depend on rain-fed and basic mechanisms for tilling the land and earning a livelihood. The only way their conditions can change is through policy shifts. Critical to this is dedicated action on the part of policymakers and the people who represent them, like legislators and members of parliament. Great changes throughout history have been born out of crises. We should therefore not waste this moment. I thank you, Ndiabulela, asante sana.
شكرا.
Thank you very much. Now I call on the Republic of Malta to take the floor. Later on, we will hear from Zambia.
Distinguished colleagues, parliamentarians, the world changed dramatically since we met in Madrid last November. No one can even think about it, that we didn't even thought about it, that the war will return to Europe in a few months' time, just a few months after the Madrid conference. We are living now in challenging times, and once again, the victims of war are the people dying in the streets of Ukraine, women and children fleeing their homes and crossing their borders towards safer and more peaceful countries. It is indeed a humanitarian tragedy. War, as you know, does not stop at the borders of those countries directly involved. It is sending shockwaves across Europe, and I must confess, across the whole world. It is also hitting our efforts to address the climate crisis. For example, the invasion of Ukraine is hampering scientific efforts to undertake vital research on climate change when it comes to permafrost in Russia, which covers 60% of its territory. We are talking about a vast area of frozen ground, which is estimated to hold twice as much greenhouse gas as there is in the whole atmosphere. One major shockwave that we have seen in recent weeks is the sudden spike in the price of fossil fuels, on which we are still very much dependent. We all know that energy prices based on fossil fuels are very volatile, but we can also learn from this experience that such volatility is not sustainable. We also know that such volatility is non-existent when using renewable sources to generate our economies, for example. I come from a very small island republic in the Mediterranean, and apart from the obvious threat of rising sea levels, we are also very much dependent on sea and air transportation. The increase in cost of transportation in recent months and weeks, which is mainly attributed to the increase in price of fossil fuels, has been phenomenal. Therefore, the transition to a green economy is not only required to save our planet, but it is also necessary for our economies. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a matter of a choice, but a matter of action. Let's be honest with ourselves. It is not an easy way forward, but we must take the same direction together. Of course, it is easier said than done. The global economy, since the last World War in particular, has based its economic generation on fossil fuels. The large majority of our investment during the last century have been centered around the provision of fossil fuels, be it cars, aeroplanes, ships, be it power to generate electricity. Therefore, we need strong political will. We need a change in the mentality. However hard it is, the world has to adapt swiftly to the changes that were brought by the pandemic. We need the same approach when it comes to climate change. The transition towards a green economy should be also fair. Its success can only be achieved if no one, and I repeat, no one is left behind. Decisions will not always be popular, but they can affect some areas and some sectors more than others, and therefore we need collectively to be sensitive when deciding and implementing reforms. Malta took the initiative to request the inclusion of climate change on the agenda of the 43rd session of the United Nations General Assembly, proposing that an appropriate high-level mechanism be established to address the cause and effects of this phenomenon on mankind. This mechanism would be tasked to propose legal and political measures to address global warming and its environmental and social economic implications. I must remind you that it was my country, Malta, way back in 1988, 6 December, when there was the Malta Resolution on the protection of global climate for present and future generations of mankind, that was at that time unanimously adopted in the plenary of the General Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, the role of politicians, but the role definitely of parliamentarians, is crucial. In 2015, Malta enacted the Climate Action Act. This act established a Climate Action Board, a body in which all sectors of our society are represented, aiming to mainstream climate action, monitor implementation of international and EU commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and facilitate preparedness and adaptation to climate impacts. This Climate Action Act also required the executive to prepare a low-carbon development strategy and a national adaptation strategy that will be reviewed and updated at least every 4 years. So Parliament is also responsible as an institution to hold the government into account. It is important to pass laws. However, laws need to be implemented on the ground in an effective way. It is the role of our parliaments that must make sure that the implementation of laws as it is done should be and targets are met in time. Climate change is a horizontal issue and cannot be tackled through a single sector alone. Let me conclude with a concrete proposal. I urge you to go back to your parliaments and work toward the setting up of a parliamentary committee with a specific aim of scrutinizing the implementation of measures relating to climate change. A specific committee solely dedicated to climate change matters in which all sectors can coordinate all the perspectives within one mechanism that can prove to be more effective. Thank you very much.
شكرا. أدعو الآن.
Thank you. Now I call on the Republic of Zambia to take the floor. After that, we will hear from the Republic of Mauritius.
Dear colleagues,
الزملاء والسيد الرئيس، دعوني أولا أعبر عن تقديري وامتناني لإعطاء هذه الفرصة للتحدث عن حشد البرلمانات للتصرف في مجال التغير المناخي. سيد الرئيس، دعني أيضا أنتهز هذه الفرصة لأتمنى لكل النساء الموجودات عيد أمهات سعيد. فإذا التغير المناخي من أكبر التحديات التنموية في القرن ال21. إن المجتمعات حول العالم، خصوصا المجتمعات الفقيرة والهشة.
Of climate change. As a woman from a developing country, climate change is close to my heart. This is because I have witnessed its devastating impacts on my country, which sadly has disproportionately affected women and girls and worsened their socio-economic status. This, Mr. President, needs to be addressed urgently by all stakeholders. While recognizing several interventions at global, regional, and national levels, climate change challenges and its effects remain complex. With the advent of COVID-19 pandemic, countries are urged to ensure that plans to recover from pandemic are ongoing. It is important to embrace and adopt health and green recovery strategies and interventions. It is therefore imperative that parliaments are mobilized to spearhead ambitious climate actions owing to their centrality by virtue of being representative institutions. Through their entrenched legislative oversight, budget, and representative functions, parliaments with their strategic mandate can be mobilized to do the following. 1. Provide legislative framework on climate change. This can be achieved by reviewing existing laws and proposing new ones where possible to mainstream climate change. 2. Influence and monitor the implementation of climate change legislation and budgets. Parliaments can be mobilized to provide effective oversight on national and international commitments, including government implementation of national legislation and budgets. Further, parliaments can provide effective oversight by ensuring that the legislation it enacts is sufficiently funded and implemented, and guarantee that the citizens it represents are consulted and included in climate change decision-making processes. While parliaments endeavor to carry out the aforementioned roles, the Zambian parliament inclusive, a number of challenges were faced. Structural and policy issues such as limited financial support, inadequate technical capacity, overlapping sectoral objectives of synergy between the diverse sectors, and insufficient relevant information and data to support members of parliament in addressing climate change issues are the most prominent challenges. To ensure that members of parliament are effective in discharging their responsibilities, the highlighted challenges need to be addressed and capacities built in order for parliaments to achieve the desired outcomes of getting to zero on climate change. Mr. President, as people's representatives and beyond the confines of legislation and oversight in parliamentarians should be mobilized to act on climate change. For example, in Zambia, parliamentarians felt the need to address the effects of climate change at local level in their constituencies, where the impacts of climate change are experienced directly by the people. Further, parliamentarians have sought to combat certain vices such as charcoal burning and deforestation, which are fast-changing rainfall patterns and worsening the impact of climate change at local level. In this regard, Mr. President, our parliamentarians established a Zambia Parliamentary Caucus, which is a cross-party voluntary grouping for parliamentarians with a mandate to work towards prioritizing and building consensus on issues that affect conservation, natural resource management, and climate change. As part of its milestone, in 2015, the caucus, in partnership with various stakeholders that work towards climate-resilient communities, such as the Worldwide Fund for Nature and the International Conservation Caucus Foundation, advocated for legislation on the forest protection and management. The caucus made a submission to the Parliamentary Committee on Lands, Environment and Tourism, which led to the enactment of the current Forest Act. Further, the Zambian Parliamentary Conservation Caucus participated in the revision of the Wildlife Act by partnering with the ministry responsible for tourism in organizing the National Parks and Wildlife Policy Workshop, where the caucus made submissions that led into the enactment of the current Wildlife Act, number 14 of 2015. The Act provides for inter-alia the sustainable management and protection of wildlife, including forest ecosystems, in the wake of climate change. Mr. President, in addition, the parliamentarians have partnered with the government of the Republic of Zambia's Forest Department to plant 1,000 trees in their constituencies as one of the measures to mitigate against the impact of climate change at community level. Mr. President, allow me to share with this August gathering that we as a parliament are doing to reduce our carbon footprint at institutional level. Our parliament works in partnership with the local recycling company to collect waste paper for recycling. Further, in 2014, our institution collaborated with the country's main power utility to install a mini solar plant as an alternative source of power. Mr. President, let me conclude by stating that parliaments are at the center of the climate change response. I, therefore, wish to call upon all parliamentarians to mobilize themselves with the intention of working closely with their citizens by consulting them and including them in the climate change decision-making process and efforts. By so doing, parliaments will inspire strong leadership and political will towards the fight against climate change. Let's think global, but act local in getting the zero on climate change. I thank you for your attention.
شكرا. الآن.
Thank you. Now I call upon the Mauritius Republic, and the next speaker after will be the Democratic Nepal Republic.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the members of the National Assembly and in my own name, I convey to you the warm greetings of the people of Mauritius. Mr. President, climate change remains one of the most critical global challenges of our times. the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has altered the global socio-economic outlook of small island developing states, confronting them with yet more complex development challenges. We should also not be oblivious to the fact that the greenhouse gas emissions from human activities that drive climate change continue unabated in spite of numerous commitments taken by individual states in line with the objectives of the Paris Agreement 2015 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Although progress towards sustainable development is particularly challenging for small islands, yet I am glad to place on record that Mauritius remains committed to protect the planet from degradation through sustainable consumption and production and by sustainably managing its natural resources and taking urgent actions on climate change to enable it to support the needs of the present and the future generations. Concrete efforts have been made by Mauritius to mitigate greenhouse gas emission and by integrating climate change issues into new development strategies. There have been strong policies, political will to further enhance the existing policies so as to develop their resilience to the adverse impacts of climate change and to ensure the achievement of sustainable development goals while integrating climate change in new development strategies. Climate change remains a high priority issue on the government's agenda, and Mauritius is determined to fulfill its obligation under climate-related multilateral agreements. Mauritius has spent some $150 million USD in support of its climate agenda in the past few years. Mr. President, Mauritius aims to create a green energy industry as an important economic pillar and promote an eco-friendly human development. Mr. President, the theme of the debate, Getting to Zero, Mobilizing Parliaments to Act on Climate Change, calls for prompt and compelling actions from all stakeholders in both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. Mr. President, I can assure you and this Assembly that the Mauritian parliamentarians play an active role in holding the government to account on its commitments taken at international and regional levels, including those made through the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for the adoption of legislation and the mitigation and adaptation measures envisaged and being taken by the government to tackle the climate change issues as a matter of priority. The frequency of climate change being the subject matter of parliamentary questions, interpretations at adjournment, interpretation at adjournment time, and queries during the Committee of Supply over the budgetary allocations and the tenor of the debates on climate-related issues bears ample testimony to the vigorous role exercised by members of Parliament in Mauritius on environment and climate change matters. Moreover, pursuant to the Mauritius Renewable Energy Agency Act, enacted in 2015, to create an agency to promote renewable energy, I appointed 2 members of the Assembly to sit on the board, therefore to ensure that parliamentarians have the say in the promotion of renewable energy. Furthermore, in 2015, the Environment Protection Banning of Plastic Bags regulations were prescribed, and since then, these regulations have been consolidated with the objective of reaching a complete ban on the utilization of all types of non-biodegradable bags in the future, including the banning of simple-use plastic products. In November 2020, the Mauritian Parliament has enacted the Climate Change Act to consolidate the legal framework and mechanism towards making Mauritius climate change resilient and achieving a low-emission economy in line with Sustainable Development Goals and the overarching government objective of developing a greener economy. This piece of legislation also serves to enhance the resilience of Mauritius against adverse impact of climate change and also complement other legislation related to climate change, thereby bringing our contribution for the sustainability of the planet. Mr. President, Mauritian parliamentarians are very active in ensuring government accountability and effectiveness, whilst at the same time providing a vital knowledge link with constituents, both aspects being important in ensuring a country's response and resilience to climate change. You may wish to take note that in December last, the Parliament of Mauritius has been called upon to debate on a private member's motion inviting the Assembly to resolve that government should continue its efforts to encourage the use of electric vehicles in Mauritius. Since 2013, the National Assembly of Mauritius embarked on a challenging and ambitious project towards achieving a paperless parliament. To that effect, members of parliament are provided with a digital tablet through which they have access to a secure digital platform for their parliamentary documents. Moreover, a parliamentary electronic document management system is being worked out with a view to creating an automated parliamentary workflow, enabling stakeholders to share their documents on a common platform, thereby reducing the use of papers and to do away with the traditional mode of communication. Mr. President, over the last 2 centuries or so, we have comprehensively demonstrated that we can change the climate, and we have changed it for the worse by doing the wrong things, a message so forcefully conveyed to us with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now it is time to show we can change it for the better by doing the right things, and this challenge is going to require the efforts of all of us. There is need for coherence across nationally determined contributions at national, regional, and global levels. To conclude, allow me to quote the UN Secretary General, who in September 2019 stated, and I quote, "The world is losing the race against climate emergency, but it is a race we can win," end of quote. So, Mr. President, let us pledge today that we will leave no stone unturned in mobilizing parliaments to effectively discharge their parliamentary missions as part of their contribution in tackling this planetary emergency. I thank you for your attention.
شكرا والآن
Thank you. The Republic of Democratic Republic, and the next speaker will be the Republic of the Timor-Leste, Democratic Timor-Leste.
His Excellency, President of the 144th session of the IPU Assembly, Speakers of the Parliament, President of the IPU, Members of the Parliament, distinguished participants and observers. First of all, on behalf of the delegation of the Federal Parliament of Nepal, I would like to thank the Parliament of Indonesia and the IPU for the invitation to attend the 144th Assembly of IPU. I extend my sincere appreciation to the government, Parliament, and the people of Indonesia for the successful arrangement of the Assembly during the COVID-19 pandemic. I would also like to express my heartfelt gratitude for the warm hospitality extended to me and my delegation ever since our arrival in this beautiful city. The theme of this assembly, Getting to Zero, Mobilizing Parliaments to Act on Climate Change, is highly relevant in the context of emerging challenges of the climate change. Combating climate action requires strong political will and, in many cases, legislative action. In this regard, dialogue and sharing of best practices among legislation of different countries will go a long way. Parliaments play a crucial role in enabling the transition to a green economy. Green economic policies and laws are vital to build a resilient economy. Strong ties among parliaments and the private sector, development partner and civil society organization will be crucial in the fight against climate change. It is essential that the adverse impact of climate change on Himalayan ecosystem catch the attention of the global community. Mountainous countries like Nepal are facing the brunt of it. Rising temperature and pollution has led to melting of snow in high mountains, creating the threat of glacier burst. Disasters following these are dangerous even for lower altitudes. Whichever country or region such disasters hit, the severest effect fall on the most vulnerable and marginalized populations. Hence, it is imperative that not only entire world hand in hand for the conservation of the Himalayan ecosystem. It is necessary that all of our esteemed friends, especially the developed countries, provide additional assistance in the Nepal's effort for risk reduction and climate change. Nepal is the country that is eligible to sell carbon to developed countries. Those want to offset their emission under the Reducing Emission through Deforestation and Degradation program. The emission reduction process is one pillar of strategic program on forest landscape and climate action in Nepal. It supports new opportunity to conserve and regenerate landscape and biodiversity, while simultaneously support most resilient, inclusive, sustainable and effective economic growth key for Nepal to build back better and greener. Excellencies, I take this opportunity to share Nepal's role in tackling climate change issues. Nepal is one of the most vulnerable countries regarding climate change. Water-induced disasters and hydrometeorological extremes events such as drought, storm, flood, inundation, landslides, debris flow, soil erosion and avalanches. Our efforts are geared at reducing emissions from the forest and increasing the carbon reserve. In this connection, it may be worthwhile to call that Nepal's community forest program has won international praise for the restoring of the country's greenery. In COP26 in Glasgow, the government of Nepal made three significant commitments with regard to net zero emission. First, Nepal has committed to increasing its forest cover to 45% by 2030 and halt deforestation completely. Second, we have also announced our goal of attaining net zero greenhouse gases emission by 2045. Third, we are committed to protecting the life and livelihoods of the people from climate-induced disasters and loss and damage. To ensure the accountability of the policies, and plans towards the most at-risk and vulnerable population and to address climate change's impact, risk and vulnerability, the Parliament of Nepal has laid emphasis on policy and legal reform to ensure compliances with environmental and climate resilient goals, as well as for the adoption of climate resilient pathways and the integration of climate change into sectorial development policies and plans, including local government planning and budgeting. All these require a major strong political will and commitments. The Parliament will ensure that Nepal meets its international and national commitments on net zero and climate resilience. In order to meet the goals set by the Paris Agreement, Nepal will adopt climate change policies and target as per the gender equality and social inclusion target outlined in the National Determined Contribution NDC Nepal Adaptation Plan and other policy targets, focusing on budget and programs aimed at improving governance systems so that climate money reach women, indigenous groups, low-income households and communities will remain high on our priority. Excellencies, the IPU Assembly is an extraordinary forum that brings together the legislature and the policy makers from across the globe to discuss contemporary issues of global significance. I am fully confident our combined efforts through the IPU Assembly will complement the work of political leadership towards net zero goals and concrete actions toward the innovative solutions to emerging climate challenges required to fulfilling sustainable goals. I assure you all support and solidarity of my delegation for the successful outcome of this assembly. Thank you. Namaskar.
شكرا.
Thank you. Thank you. The Republic of Armenia. The next speaker would be the ECOWAS Parliament would follow. ECOWAS.
Excelentíssima Senhor Presidente da Assembleia, Yang Mulia Ketua DPR RI Ibu Puan Maharani, Dr. Duarte Pacheco, Senhor Presidente da Mesa, Excelências, Senhor. Nas últimas décadas, o mundo passou por grandes transformações políticas e económicas. Embora muitos desafios globais permaneçam e tenham crescido em complexidade, em particular a degradação do meio ambiente, as mudanças climáticas cada vez maiores e o impacto inevitável da pandemia da Covid-19 sobre o desenvolvimento os objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável. Tal como noutros países, os confinamentos por causa da pandemia afetam enormemente o nosso setor social e econômico.
Deeply affects all sectors.
As famílias vulneráveis e o setor empresarial através.
We are protecting certain sectors in order, and so we're going to set up a awareness raising campaign. Almost 72% vaccination campaign. 72% of the population are vaccinated. Excellencies, Timor-Leste has seen periods of drought, also forest fires. These are the impacts of climate change and having an impact on food security. Also, last year, Timor-Leste was struck by tropical storms which cause losses in human life and widespread destruction. Climate change is caused by all of us, by greenhouse gas emissions, and mainly through emissions from the key economies and developed countries. Timor-Leste is only responsible for 0.3% of emissions, but in spite of this, we are some of the most vulnerable to climate change. And so we are one of the developing countries that has been at the forefront of reducing emissions in order to achieve our 2050 goals as committed to at Glasgow. Presidents, Excellencies, Parliamentarians, Timor-Leste is fully committed to adopting documents such as the Paris Agreements, the Kyoto Protocol. And this is an example of our commitment to dealing with this in order to guarantee sustainable development. I would like to reiterate that Timor-Leste needs to improve its resilience in the face of climate change for sustainable development in order to promote rights for all. In this context, Timor-Leste is calling on the whole Assembly to cooperate and to make shared efforts to reach political agreement in order that we can be effective and ensure that all citizens, including women and children, can benefit from these promises on the 2030 agenda. And this is for the well-being of humanity as a whole. Thank you very much.
شكرا لجمهورية.
Thank you. Now we call on the Republic of Armenia, and later on we will hear ECOWAS. We will hear from ECOWAS.
Mr. President, Excellencies, fellow parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to thank our Indonesian host for the excellent organization of the Assembly and warm hospitality extended to all participants. The topic we are discussing is the utmost importance for the world since climate change entails dangerous consequences. Global warming and our long-term climate change trends are expected to continue as a result of record levels of head-tripping greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. As stated in the outcome document of a parliamentary meeting on the occasion of COP26, the global temperature is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 Celsius of warming by 2040, and may trigger irreversible damage to our planet and engage biodiversity. Climate change, with its negative impact on human life, the environment and economic development, is among the main challenges facing humankind. This is especially true for Armenia as landlocked mountainous country. Although as a country Armenia is making only a small contribution to greenhouse gas emission, the country is taking active measures such as the ratification of Paris Agreement in February 2017 to reduce carbon emissions, thereby contributing to the international community's effort to address climate changes. On April 22, 2021,
the government approved Armenia's national determined contribution for a 10-year implementation period, setting a new unconditional mitigation target of 40% reduction below 1990s emissions level to be achieved in 2030. For the first time, Armenia adopted its national adaptation plan of action on climate changes aimed at supporting and improving synergies and coordination between and across sectoral initiatives. Armenia approved its NDC for a 10-year implementation period, 2021-2030, to the Paris Agreement, setting a new unconditional mitigation target of 40% reduction below 1990 emissions levels to be achieved in 2040 and increasing its territories covered by forest by 12.9%. My country is promoting policies to increase the share of renewable energy in the power generation sector, expanding solar generation on the demand side, promoting energy savings in all sectors of economy, including expanding the supply of high-efficiency equipment in the industrial and building sectors, promoting eco-friendly vehicles, and improving road infrastructure in the transportation sector. As we rebuild from the pandemic, additional significant efforts will be needed to promote green recovery and ensure further carbon emission reduction. This will require a concrete effort across all sectors of economy and society, and primarily in the energy sector as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Relevant legislative and regulatory reforms are underway. The most recently adopted energy sector development strategic program aimed at increasing the share of solar energy generation in total to at least 50% by 2030. Armenia aims to double the country's share of renewable in energy generation by 2030 on the path to achieve climate neutrality in the second half of this century. According to the Republic of Armenia Energy Sector Development Strategic Program, the Armenian government plans to increase the share of solar energy generation in total to at least 50%. To this end, several legislative and regulatory reforms have been implemented in the recent years. Colleagues, as a part of climate commitments, Armenia has initiated a number of solar energy projects as a way to introduce cost-effective renewable energy sources in the country in line with its vision to foster low-carbon generation and develop renewables. Given the worldwide environmental challenges and their impact of climate and the pivotal role of nature conservation as a means to ensure social, economic, and environmentally substantive development, I once again wish to reiterate our readiness to cooperate with the parliaments of all member states, agencies, international organizations, and the private sector in advancing the global environmental agenda. Parliaments are responsible for ensuring the implementation of conventions and agreements, as well as national legislation, including and especially on environmental issues. And I would like to state that our National Assembly is duly overseeing these processes. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we are responsible for a safe and secure planet for our children and future generations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now, I would like to call on the Parliament of ECOWAS to take the floor. After that, we will hear from the Republic of Sri Lanka.
Mr. President, Secretary General, colleagues, honorable members of Parliament, let me begin by thanking the Parliament of Indonesia for the kind reception and hospitality in this beautiful city of Bali. Today, the world is experiencing rapidly rising temperatures in the summer, harshness of winters, and the droughts shriveling up vegetation. I could go on listing these changes we have all experienced in the past few decades. Climate change is an unavoidable change that is devastating our planet and threat to the existence of life on Earth. The call for action was resonant all over the world, and to some degree, successes were recorded in slowing down the degradation of our planet. However, it is now time to mobilize communities, nations, and regions. Members of Parliament should place more emphasis on the environment through the various interventions they carry on in their countries and constituencies. They should not only focus on areas like agriculture, education, health, and other infrastructural projects. Rather, there should be mainstreaming of climate change in all our national budgets. Each sector of the economy should incorporate this phenomenon in its budget planning process. Furthermore, there should be national policies on climate change, and members of Parliament should be provided with adequate knowledge on adaptation and mitigation measures. In the ECOWAS region, many countries are experiencing severe droughts, deforestation, desertification, flooding, coastal erosion, disease outbreaks, famine, and food shortages because of climate change. To redress these challenges, the ECOWAS Commission, with the full participation of the ECOWAS Parliament and other stakeholders, has drawn up a strategic program for reducing vulnerability to climate change in West Africa. The ECOWAS Commission expects members of Parliament to be proactive and support the climate change program through sensitization campaigns on the use of renewable energy, alternative sources of charcoal and wood consumption across the region, and the formulation of laws to mitigate the negative effects of climate change. It is worth mentioning that because treaty negotiations are an exclusive action, executive action, members of Parliament are generally not involved. Upon conclusion of such negotiations, it is imperative that members should be given adequate briefing on the objectives, background, content, and expected outcome of such agreements. This would foster their understanding and possible buy-in into the agreement. It will also ease ratification by the various parliaments. One of the standing committees at the ECOWAS Parliament is the Committee on Agriculture, Environment, and Natural Resources. To promote synergy, the committee works closely with the Department of Agriculture and Environment of the ECOWAS Commission on the policy and program implementation issues on the environment and climate change. I wish to recall some major accomplishments through the organization of delocalized committee meetings on climate change. Some of the recommendations of these meetings, such as ensuring that substantial budgetary allocations are made and climate change issues mainstream in national budgets of member states, were adopted. To conclude, I call on all members of Parliament across the world to come together to mobilize the necessary action to combat this climate menace. We need to unite. Together, we are stronger. And it is only when we are stronger and we are together that we shall succeed. Thank you very much.
Shukran.
Thank you. Now I would like to call on the Republic Democratic of Sri Lanka. Later on, we will hear from the head of the Arab Parliament.
Honorable Chair, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am glad to address you in Nusa Dua, Bali, Indonesia. Climate change is one of the greatest threats to global prosperity and development. It is alarming that the increasing emissions of greenhouse gases will leave the world irrevocably changed. Climate change reflects on rise of sea level and vastly different climate during devastating heat waves. Persistent droughts and unprecedented floods, it would impact the lives of people, mainly in poor and vulnerable, including food and health security, infrastructure, and ecosystem integrity. As the policymakers, we unitedly stand for the global priority to cut global greenhouse gas emissions, increase forest coverage, and resist environmentally harmful human activities in order to limit global average temperature rise. We strongly believe that legislatures, as the representatives of the people, have a pivotal role in identifying, highlighting good practice at the local level in order to formulate national policies and legislation while educating the general public about the global challenge of climate change. Now let's briefly discuss the situation in my country, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, the tropical nation, is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. As a small island in the Indian Ocean, the coastal region of Sri Lanka is susceptible to changes in sea level. 1/3 of the total population of the country lives in the coastal belt, which was severely affected in the tsunami in 2004. It was indicated vulnerability of sea level in the future. Global climate changes also would affect the national economy and livelihood of the people who are engaged in tourism, agriculture, plantation, and fisheries sectors. In order to address the environmental challenges caused by climate change secretariat was established under the Ministry of Environment. The Cabinet Memorandum adopted in 2021 on national determination contributions related to Paris Climate Agreement to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is highlighted that Sri Lanka has been acting as a stakeholder of the United Nations Framework Convention Climate Change from 1993 and signed the Paris Climate Agreement and ratified the agreement in 2016. The fundamental objectives of the Paris Agreement is to maintain global warming under 2 Celsius compared to the pre-industrialization era level and to take all applicable precautions to maintain it as 1.5 Celsius. In relation to that, the Cabinet has approved the proposal by the Environment Ministry to submit the nationally determined contribution that ever been re-updated with the participation of stakeholder institutions of relevant sectors by adjusting to the government policies and appoint a national monitoring committee to supervise whether these contributions are implemented efficiency and productively. The action plan covers the following strategic areas. Number 1, the clean air in everywhere. Number 2, the saving the fauna and flora and ecosystems. Number 3, meeting the challenge of climate change. Number 4, wise use of the coastal belt and the sea around. Number 5, responsible use of land resources. Number 6, doing away with dumps. Number 7, water for all at all times. Number 8, green cities for health and prosperity. Number 9, greening the industries. Number 10, knowledge of rights choices. Next, what is the role of the parliamentarian? Parliament. The Parliament has special commitments to focus on lawmaking and oversight with regard to mitigating climate change and minimizing carbon emissions and transforming the renewable energy policy as proposed in the budget proposals in 2021. In addition, parliamentary committees such as the ministerial consultative committees and special committees can study alternative approaches to scrutinize the existing systems with experience and knowledge of the academia and the experts. The parliamentary committees provide ideal forums for fruitful discussions on key areas. The executive legislature and bureaucracy are in the position to initiate relevant programs. Finally, it is the responsibility of the Parliament to allocate more financial resources for climate action, which is goal number 13 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much for being listened to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to call on the President of the Arab Parliament. After that, we will hear from Greece. Honorable Mr. Duarte Pacheco, President of the IPU, President of the Assembly, Secretary General of the IPU, colleagues, Presidents of Parliaments and heads of parliamentary delegations, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed gathering, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I wish to express my pleasure at participating in the 144th IPU Assembly and to convey my sincere thanks and appreciation to the Parliament of the Republic of Indonesia for the well-organized proceedings of the meetings and the valuable efforts in this respect. Climate change remains the ultimate challenge faced by our world today, with its challenging and grave implications that extend to all aspects of life and affect the future of present and future generations. Undoubtedly, addressing this crisis is not limited to the efforts of governments, but parliamentarians have an instrumental role to play in that regard through their legislative and oversight powers that make them a key guarantee for the implementation of the objectives of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and to translate the international obligations contained in the UNFCCC into national legislation supportive of the green economy. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, we all agree on the inevitable collective international action to address the climate crisis. In this connection, let me emphasize on behalf of the Arab Parliament that any constructive and fruitful climate cooperation must be based on two fundamental pillars. The first pillar is the need for all states to fulfill their obligations based on the principles of equity and shared responsibilities. We must be honest in this context and emphasize the commitment to the principle of international climate justice when implementing the obligations contained in the UNFCCC, and to ensure that the responsibilities that states must assume are proportional to the magnitude of the damage they cause to the environment. At a time where more advanced states are producing the largest proportion of harmful emissions responsible for global warming, states with limited resources are the most affected by climate change and the most vulnerable to its consequences. Therefore, there must be equitable burden sharing and the fulfillment of related commitments. The second pillar is the necessity to assist developing countries in implementing their commitments to confront climate change in accordance with the Paris Agreement, under which developed countries have pledged to jointly mobilize $100 billion per year in support of climate action in developing countries to date. However, that remains to be realized. This gap between available funding and the actual needs of developing countries must therefore be eliminated. I look forward that our Assembly will issue a global parliamentary appeal calling on developed countries to act on their commitments to provide the necessary funding to developing countries in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, dear guests, the Arab states have made strenuous efforts and launched pioneering initiatives to address the climate change crisis. In this context, I refer to the Middle East Green Initiative, launched by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which sets out an ambitious and unequivocal roadmap for mobilizing regional efforts to address the climate change crisis. And I call on our Assembly to support and embrace this initiative, which serves as a role model for efforts to address the climate change crisis at the regional level. In parallel, we are proud to say that 2 Arab states will host, respectively, the COP summit to be held in the Arab Republic of Egypt next year in 2022 and the United Arab Emirates in 2023. This reflects the pioneering efforts of the Arab states in addressing this crisis. And I call to take advantage of the preparatory parliamentary meetings for these summits to develop an international parliamentary plan of action to support the implementation of the commitments contained in the UNFCCC. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, while this session of our Assembly is dedicated to the subject of climate change, we cannot ignore current developments and their impact on the security system and international justice. The world has rose up over the past few years due to contemporary developments in the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. We certainly are not in favor of violating the sovereignty of any state in any way, or threatening the security and stability of any state. However, we would like to say that there is a people that has been subjected to the most repugnant forms of occupation over the past 7 decades, which is the Palestinian people. And the world never did anything to end the suffering of that people and to establish its independent state. International action with the cause of the Palestinian people and with the developments in the Russian-Ukrainian crisis is a stark example of double standards. Humanitarian engagement should be the same at all times, places, and with all peoples. Our plea is that there be common global standards to achieve the international justice that we all seek. In conclusion, I would like to thank you for listening. Peace be upon you.
Shukran.
Thank you. I call upon Greece to give its speech, and the next speaker would be from the United Kingdom.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, for decades, scientists have been warning us about the devastating consequences of global warming. Although international organizations, governments, and politicians keep setting goals to avoid the worst, most of these goals never achieved. Today, climate change and its consequences have overtaken us. Every continent, every region, and every country facing significant challenges due to climate change. Extreme heat and cold conditions, storms in higher frequency and intensity, floods and wildfires are some of the dramatic effects of this phenomenon. The growing number of climate-related disasters has shifted awareness, and today many governments accept climate change as an issue of national security. None of us has the right to stay still, leaving the so-called big polluters to act. Every single country's action has an impact of the world's global green transition. Thus, cooperation and collaboration are essential. International commitments, as the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda, cannot be materialized without national actions. All countries need new climate laws as a legal framework for the next 20 or 30 years. We should ask ourselves which targets or goals we need to achieve on a national level and describe and define the roadmap for the years to come. As parliamentarians, it is our duty to ensure that these laws not only created but also applied, because climate change causes disasters, which in turn increase inequality and poverty. Furthermore, we have to make sure that a number of other policies are also adjusted. For example, warning systems and defenses have to be set up, as well as resilient infrastructures. This is essential in order to prevent loss of lives, destructions of homes, livelihoods, loss of jobs, etc. There is also need of social assistance for people facing such dramatic situations. In this context, interparliamentary cooperation can contribute to the exchange of expertise and best practices. In Greece, for example, we had a major catastrophe by mega fires last summer, and social assistance was a critical issue. Strong political will and determination is required for comprehensive approach and response to climate change. And this, of course, means extra financing, which is rather a problem for many countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in the European Union, we recently took the decision to create a European Recovery Fund in order to cope up with the economic crisis after the pandemic. And among others, with this fund, we are financing actions and policies to prevent climate change, investing in renewables, investing in green energy, accelerating the phase-out of coal energy, and speeding up the switch to electrical vehicles are some of the measures to achieve the ambitious 2030 emissions reductions. At the same time, these actions boost the economy and contribute to creations of new jobs. So actually is a win-win situation. As many countries face difficulties to afford the green transition, the European Union supports developing countries in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to the impacts of climate change. In 2020, 23.4 billion euros were committed by the European Union for this purpose. The EU also remains committed, contributing towards the developed countries' goal of jointly mobilizing 100 billion euros per year to support developing countries until 2025. As parliamentarians, we need and have to press our governments to act effectively against climate change and to implement the relative international agreements. We are running out of time. There is no space for excuses. It is our generation obligation to hand over to our children and grandchildren a better and safer planet. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to share a thought. It's so pity to see these days the billions of dollars and euros caused by the war right now in Russia. Imagine if all this money and then the money to reconstruct Ukraine were devoted to the climate change, to prevent climate change. Just think about that. It's so pity. Thank you very much.
شكرا.
Thank you. I call upon the representative of the
أدعو الآن
the representative of the United Kingdom to speak, and then we will have the French Republic to take the floor after the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians, and thank you to our Indonesian hosts for your warm welcome to your beautiful country. The theme of this debate is getting to zero and mobilizing parliaments to act on climate change. However, this assembly is taking place during 3 simultaneous crises. Yes, there is a climate emergency. There is also a pandemic. But there is also an illegal and brutal invasion by one UN member state of another UN member state. Parliamentarians, let us commit ourselves at this assembly to ending these 3 crises. First of all, there can be no more shocking environmental damage than that created by bombs, that created by tanks invading a neighboring country. The world is rightly horrified by the humanitarian crisis, the refugees, the civilians trapped in Ukrainian cities, the maternity clinics bombed. But we should not overlook the harm done to the environment as well. The habitats destroyed, the beaches defiled, the fields of crops ruined that feed the world, the risk of food insecurity. We cannot look away from the sheer environmental crime of thermobaric weapons, reports of white phosphorus and untargeted air raids. We know how to end this crisis. Russia must withdraw its army today and stop bombing and then negotiate. And I urge my fellow parliamentarians today to ask them to do that in our emergency motion. The pandemic emergency has also horrified every country. According to a recent study, 18 million people have died from COVID-19. A population the size or larger than many countries. We know how to end this crisis too. Thanks to the work of brilliant scientists around the world, there's a range of effective vaccines and the will to donate them. As we agreed unanimously at our last assembly, we must make every effort to help distribute these vaccines equitably and to the remotest parts of our world. So, parliamentarians, I give you good news. These 2 terrible crises can end soon. Tomorrow, Putin could choose to end his illegal invasion. And this year, if we focus resources on a comprehensive vaccine rollout, with the right doses, getting to the right places at the right time, we can do what we have seen in my country and move from pandemic to endemic status for this disease. The climate emergency can be solved too, but only if we as parliamentarians take action. The UK was honoured to host COP26 with Italy this year, and we published a strong outcome document from parliamentarians which was agreed unanimously by all of those who joined us in Glasgow. And already the UK Parliament has put into law the need to get to net zero by 2050. We've installed offshore wind generating capacity, which in our very windy islands means that we often get half of our electricity from wind. We've installed solar, which even in our cloudy islands means we can often generate a lot of domestic power during the day. We've installed onshore wind, hydropower, and we have great capacity to do more. We have nuclear, we're building new nuclear, and we have developed small modular nuclear reactors. Only 3% of our energy comes from Russia, and with the price now for fossil fuels, we have the added attraction that renewables are often now cheaper than fossil fuels. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has given new impetus to us and to our allies to wean ourselves off Russian oil and gas and invest in cleaner energy sources. And we're doing other things. 1 in 4 cars that were bought in the UK last year was an electric car. We're investing in new solutions like hydrogen buses, electrified railways, hydrogen trucks. We're finding timeless solutions like reforestation, reducing unsustainable wood burning, and preserving peatlands and wetlands. So parliamentarians, what gets measured gets done. And we have put into law milestones on our journey to net zero, and Parliament plays a key role in measuring that progress, holding the government to account. So there are 3 crises in this world at the moment, and
know it quite well, how is the methodology of vote in our organization during this time of emergency item. Mr. Secretary General.
Hello. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. The procedure is that you will invite those who have proposed those proposals one after the other in the order in which the proposals were submitted to the Secretariat. You will listen to one person speaking in favor of those proposals, and if there are people who want to object to any of those proposals, they will be given the floor to speak against the proposal one after the other. And when the three proposals have been presented, and at the end, if the three proposals are maintained, you will then call for a vote. And that vote, according to the rules, will be by roll call. The rules stipulate that for an emergency item to be adopted and put on the agenda of the Assembly, it has to have obtained 2/3 of the majority, the 2/3 majority of the votes cast by the Assembly members. And in the case of several proposals, the one that will be accepted is the one that has obtained the 2/3 majority and also the most votes. Mr. President, as you have said, only one item may be placed on the agenda of the Assembly as an emergency item. Regarding the voting entitlements, each delegation present here is entitled to a number of votes, though there is a table indicating how many votes each delegation may cast, depending on a number of criteria that are defined in the rules. And I do take it that you all have that table in front of you and that you know how many votes you will be able to cast in each of in the voting on each of the proposals that will be put to the vote. So once that initial phase of explanation of the proposals has been concluded, Mr. President, and in the event of several proposals still being on the table, then you will call for a vote. Otherwise, if there is just one item that remains on the table, then you don't need to do a roll call vote. The Assembly will be called upon to adopt that proposal by acclamation. So that is how, Mr. President, this Assembly will be called upon to proceed at this particular stage to adopt an emergency item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's always important to present the methodology of vote. I know that for many of us that attending the meetings of IPU for a long time, it's a repetition, but in all our assemblies we have new colleagues attending, and we need to explain, because it is not easy to explain our system of votes. Dear colleagues, so it's clear that one person may present the item and another one, just one, is our statute what to say, may speak against. So we have three proposals, and we need to begin for the first one, of course. That was presented on 16th of March by Ukraine. And I will call the representative of Ukraine to present a proposal. It will be in a virtual way, by video, and we will give the floor to our colleague. You have the floor, Lesia.
Thank you. And hello, colleagues, albeit from such very unconditional surroundings, unusual surroundings. Unfortunately, I am unable to be present with you as I travel now along the Ukraine-Polish border to cross into Ukraine with humanitarian aid for my country. And I cannot cross at the normal border crossing because we have information that the Belarusian forces and army will be actually invading Ukraine along the Ukraine-Belarusian border. So with that, I would like to make the appeal to you as a member of the Assembly, as a president of the IPU Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, and also as a member of Parliament of Ukraine, to tell you a little bit of what is going on in Ukraine. At the moment, we are in war. This is not a conflict. This is not a situation. This is an all-out war of aggression waged by Russia on Ukraine. Other than that, Ukrainians, we don't have a problem with Russians. Our only problem is that the Russian Federation and their troops and their army are killing Ukrainians, are killing Ukrainian women and children, are putting Ukrainian members of parliament like myself on special red and black lists. The red list is for those to be killed straight away as soon as the Russian troops get to us. The black list is for those to be taken hostage to Moscow or elsewhere to be tortured. This is the truth, this is the sad truth, the sad reality in which I and 426 of my colleagues have been living in for the last 26 days. This is the 26th day of war and of living in the war zone. For this, I ask all of you to support a resolution unanimously in the same way as the United Nations General Assembly has done on the 1st of March when 141 countries have voted for the condemnation of the war of aggression waged by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. For this, I ask you that the resolution that you will be considering and voting on today shall include those very terms as seen in and as envisaged in the UN General Assembly and other international documents that have been voted on so many assemblies of which you or your colleagues or your governments are part of. With this, I understand that we must stand united against this plague of aggression, against this crime, which is affecting not just Ukraine, but the whole framework of security and defense in the world as we know it today. It's not just about Ukraine or Russia. It's about a country attempting to go back to the practice of empires, a practice that has been long forgotten and that should stay in history books, not have their way back into the 21st century. We must stop this as a community of parliamentarians, as a and as the international community. With that, I would like to inform that the Ukrainian delegation is withdrawing our proposal for the resolution on the emergency item in favor of the New Zealand resolution that has been drafted by a number of you in the assembly in Bali with the participation from our part. And with that, we would ask you, on behalf of the Ukrainian delegation and of the 44 million people of Ukraine who are now risking their lives for freedom of the world, we ask you to support this New Zealand resolution and to vote on it and condemn once and for all the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine and against the whole of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against?
There is no proposal to speak against.
Okay. The Secretary General, we are right. As the proposal, as Ukraine withdraw the proposal, there is no possibility that someone speaks against something that was a withdraw. You are right. And so we go to the second proposal by Indonesia on 20th of March. Mr. Zon will propose, yes.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon us all. The Interparliamentary Union, IPU, was established to be the bridge builder, and we base our organization on the foundation of parliamentary democracy. So therefore, we would like to submit the role of Parliament, the role of parliaments in supporting a peaceful resolution to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Because we are the parliamentarians and we represent the people. This proposed emergency item aims to highlight the urgent need to enhance Parliament solidarity through effective parliamentary diplomacy and human rights to address the overarching conflicts that have threatened peace, democracy, and human rights all over the world. In crisis and conflict situations, parliaments have a fundamental role to play in resolving the conflict or building lasting peace through dialogue and reconciliation processes. The Interparliamentary Union is the global organization of national parliaments working for peace, democracy, and human rights through political dialogue, cooperation, and parliamentary action, and is responsible for ensuring that our work is at the service of the people for peace and development. In line with the IPU strategy for 2022-2026, collective parliamentary action on strengthening peace and security is imperative. Today, the world is witnessing protracted conflict and violence which have pushed millions into dependence on humanitarian assistance. This has been exacerbated by the infringement of international laws and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. As the world struggles to recover from the pandemic, we are deeply concerned by the recent Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which has caused disruption to millions of civilian lives and thousands of military casualties. This situation has also forced millions of people to flee the country, which has led to worsening humanitarian crisis. The conflict has also had multiple effects leading to economic downturn and social chaos, which creates further complexities. Its impact has transcended administrative borders and become pervasive across the region. So in response to this situation, Parliament's collective action in promoting respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty is critical to ensure a conducive environment for peaceful dialogue to take place and the safe passage of all civilians, regardless of their national, ethnic, and racial backgrounds. More importantly, parliamentary diplomacy is playing an increasingly important role in peace initiatives and conflict prevention efforts. In this regard, it is important for the global parliamentary community to support efforts in stopping the war, de-escalating the situation, ensuring a peaceful resolution to the conflict, and facilitating humanitarian assistance for people in need, especially women, children, and elderly, and other vulnerable groups, and establishing a secure humanitarian corridor to allow safe passage. Therefore, IPU members must encourage the respective governments to refrain from the use of military force and promote feasible solutions to end the conflict. To follow up on this matter, it is recommended that the IPU establish a task force on the situation in Ukraine, led by the IPU and comprising members from concerned but impartial IPU member parliaments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I ask if someone wish to present Poland. You can from your seat to express your reservation to this proposal. It's possible, allow me, just a second, please. It's possible to have the image of the speaker on the screen? Because if there is no, you come to the podium. Everyone needs to see who is, okay.
Yes. Dear colleagues, in behalf of the group 12+, I am against this proposal of Indonesia. Why? It's very easy. This is not ordinary conflict. This is war. This is war. This is unprovoked, unjustified military aggression against Ukraine. It's a full-scale war, unlike anything Europe has seen since World War II. And this aggression is danger, not only for Europe, not only for Ukraine, for all Europe and for all the world. And all the countries, all the continents will have the consequences of this war in economic level, migration level, climate change level, everything. That's why we are against. We support this New Zealand proposal.
Thank you. Now to the proposal 3 from New Zealand, presented on the 21st of March. I will give the floor to our colleague, Louisa Wall.
Which one? Yeah? Okay, just put it up. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, tēnā koutou katoa. Mr. President, dear friends and colleagues, as a representative of the New Zealand Parliament, we could not be more distant from the conflict in Ukraine. Unlike our colleague Lesia Vasilenko and her colleagues, and like all of us, we can only do what we can do to support our Ukrainian citizens who need our help to meet their immediate and basic humanitarian needs, and to stop the destruction of homes, of communities, of the Ukrainian way of life. And therefore, in the spirit of the IPU commitment to democracy for everyone, New Zealand has proposed this emergency item: peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine, respecting international law, the Charter of the UN, and territorial integrity. This title was so eloquently articulated on this stage last night by Her Excellency Dr. H.C. Puan Maharani, that underpins our international rules-based system. So with drafting support from colleagues representing Ukraine and Indonesia, we propose this emergency item. This will ensure the intent of both of these proposals are respected here at this 144th IPU. We ask that we come together in the spirit of unity to ensure a dialogue about the situation in Ukraine in a manner that helps to seek a diplomatic solution, helps to bring about the cessation of hostilities, helps to advocate for peace. We are part of the solution. As parliamentarians, as part of the IPU, an organisation that is 133 years old, please support our proposal that enables all of us to support the Ukraine and Indonesian emergency item proposals. Finally, a thank you to our wonderful Indonesian hosts. May peace be with us all. Kia ora.
Dear colleagues, now I ask on the same criterion if someone wishes to speak against that proposal. South Africa. Now there is just one, maybe you can understand yourselves, because in accordance with our statutes, it's just one in favor and one against. And so if I saw if you talk each other to understand who will speak against. South Africa? Okay. South Africa.
No, thank you very much, President. We stand to speak against the emergency item as proposed by New Zealand and state from the beginning that a much more measured and sensible motion is the one that was introduced by Indonesia, because it specifies just exactly what has to be done by the Interparliamentary Union, a task force that should make practical interventions and encourage dialogue in resolving the conflict in Ukraine. The motion that is proposed by New Zealand already comes with some conclusive remarks in terms of their characterization of what is happening in that part of the world, without due regard and consideration of the geopolitics that are said to be the reasons for the conflict to happen in the manner that it is. So as a representative body, a multilateral institution that reflects different perspectives from different parts of the world, the most sensible thing to do is to work on the basis of a balanced, sensible, and properly measured intervention and guidance of the motion that is presented by Indonesia, instead of one that comes with conclusive remarks and observations which ignores the dynamics that have led to the conflict. There are so many issues that are, of course, contentious in relation to the motion itself. So let's look into it differently. I think that let's take the Indonesia approach so that there is a balanced discussion, not a one-sided conclusive remarks that ignore, of course, the geopolitical issues that have been raised on several occasions. So we stand opposed to the New Zealand motion and support the one that is proposed by Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have two proposals, and in accordance with our statutes, as the Secretary General explained, if you have just one, it's done. We have two, we need to go to the vote process. And so to go to the process vote, Ambassador Philip will begin the process. Everyone may be seated. As you know, you vote one, and the votes for the first one. First one is the proposal of Indonesia. The proposed B is the proposal of New Zealand.
Mr. President, with your permission, we will therefore start the vote for the emergency item. We would kindly ask all the delegates, so as to make this as smooth and as timely as possible, to please keep quiet in the room. I do not intend to repeat your vote, so please speak into the microphone, if possible in English, French, or Spanish, so that my colleagues can very clearly note your vote. And we will start with the first country in alphabetical order seated in this room, the Czech Republic. You have 13 votes. So for the proposal by Indonesia, please. Proposal by New Zealand, please. Thank you. Democratic Republic of the Congo, you have 17 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
La proposition de la Nouvelle-Zélande.
So you have 17 votes. With regard to the proposal by Indonesia, do you vote for or against?
Contre.
Against.
Votes against. On the proposal by New Zealand, 17 votes in favor. "17 votes in favor." Thank you. Denmark, 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
12 votes against Indonesia.
On the proposal by New Zealand.
12 votes for New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Djibouti absent, Dominican Republic absent. Ecuador, you have 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
El voto de Ecuador es en contra.
Our vote is against.
Against. On the proposal by New Zealand.
A favor de la propuesta de Nueva Zelanda.
In favour of the proposal by New Zealand.
Thank you. Egypt, you have 20 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
20 votes for.
Proposal by New Zealand.
20 votes abstention.
Thank you. Equatorial Guinea absent. Estonia, 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
11 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
11 votes in favor of peace. I mean New Zealand.
Thank you. Eswatini, absent. Ethiopia, absent. Finland, 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Gracias. 12 votos.
Thank you. 12 votes against.
Zealand.
12 votes.
12 votes in favour of peace and New Zealand.
Thank you. France, vous avez 18 votes. Proposition par Indonésie.
18 against. Proposal by New Zealand. 18 in favour. Thank you for speaking French very much. Thank you.
19 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
19 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
19 votes in favor.
Thank you. Ghana, 14 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
19 votes against.
Ghana, you have 14 votes.
14 against Indonesia, 14 in favor of New Zealand, and in favor of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Greece, 13 votes. Proposal by Indonesia, please.
13 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
13 votes in favor.
Thank you. We have Guinea next. 13 votes, please. Proposal by Indonesia.
13 voix contre.
Proposal by New Zealand.
13 votes against for the first one, 13 in favor.
You have 8 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
8 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
8 votes for New Zealand.
8 votes in favor. Thank you. India, you have 23 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
We abstain.
13 abstention, 23 abstention. Proposal by New Zealand.
We abstain.
Abstention. Indonesia, 22 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
Indonesia, 20 votes in favor.
22 votes in favor. And proposal by New Zealand.
22 against.
Thank you. Iran, 19 votes. Proposal by Indonesia, please.
19 votes in favor.
Proposal by New Zealand. The microphone, please.
10 votes against.
Thank you. Italy, 10 votes.
10 votes in favor of New Zealand against Indonesia.
Thank you. Japan, 20 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
Indonesia.
We abstain for the proposal of Indonesia, 20 votes in abstention. 20 votes in abstention for Indonesia.
Abstention. Proposal by New Zealand.
We are in favor of the New Zealand proposal. 20 votes in favor.
12 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
But Indonesia, 10 against, 2 abstains. New Zealand, 12 in favor. The Ukraine, 7 in favor, 5 against.
Thank you very much. The Ukrainian proposal has been withdrawn. So Israel, 12 votes in favor of the proposal by New Zealand. And we have the vote on the proposal by Indonesia. Indonesia, it was 10 in favor, 2 abstentions. Yeah. Thank you. Jordan, absent. Kazakhstan, 13 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
13 votes in favor of the Indonesian proposal and 13 abstentions for the New Zealand proposal.
Kenya, 15 votes. Proposal by Indonesia. Absent. Kuwait, 11 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
In favor.
11 in favor. Proposal by New Zealand.
Abstention.
11 abstention. Laos, you have 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
12 votes for abstention.
12 votes abstention. And proposal by New Zealand, please.
12 votes abstention.
Thank you. Latvia, 9 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
9 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
9 votes in favor.
Thank you. Madagascar, Malawi, absent. Malaysia, Maldives, you have 10 votes. Proposal by Indonesia.
We would like to abstain, use our 10 votes in abstention of the Indonesian proposal.
Abstention for Indonesia.
and we would like to vote in favor of the New Zealand proposal on the emergency item.
10 votes in favor. Thank you. Malta, 8 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
8 votes, abstention, Indonesia, 8 votes in favor, New Zealand.
Thank you. Mauritius, 11 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Abstention, 11 votes.
Abstention, proposal by New Zealand.
11 votes in favor.
In favor, thank you. Mexico, 18 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
Para Indonesia,
8 votes in favor of Indonesia. 8 in favor and 10 in favor of New Zealand.
Votes. Yes. So all of them are in favor of Indonesia.
No. Indonesia a favor. 8 a favor.
8 in favor.
8 and 10. 10 para Nueva Zelanda.
The distinguished delegate of Mexico, we will vote on each individual proposal for which you cast all your votes.
No pueden ser todos a favor. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos? Ok. Entonces, a favor los 18 para Nueva Zelanda o para... Ok, 18 a favor.
18 in favor of New Zealand.
In favor of New Zealand.
Yes.
And in regards to the Indonesia proposal?
Abstención.
We did it.
Yes.
Abstention in regard to the proposal by Indonesia. Thank you. We move on to Monaco. Is Monaco in the room? Yes, you have 10 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
10 votes contre.
We vote against. 10 votes. And 10.
Did you get that? I'm sorry, we have trouble hearing you. Microphone. So again, on the proposal by
10 voices against. Votes against. And for the 10 in favor.
15 votes on the proposal by absent. Mozambique.
Use this microphone, sir.
13. You have 13 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Abstenção.
13. Abstention. Proposal by New Zealand.
Abstenção.
Abstention. Namibia. You have 11 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
In support.
11 in favor, and on the proposal by New Zealand?
Abstention.
11 abstention. Nepal, 14 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, absent. Netherlands, 13 votes on the proposal by Indonesia. And on the proposal by New Zealand? 11. New Zealand, 12 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
12 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand.
12 votes in favor.
Thank you. Niger, 13 votes. Pour la proposition d'Indonésie.
For the Indonesian proposal, Indonesia 13 in favor. And for the New Zealand proposal, none, 0. 0, none against. Against.
20 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Nigeria, 20 votes in favor.
On the proposal by New Zealand.
20 votes totally against.
Norway, 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
12 votes against the proposal of Indonesia.
And on the proposal by New Zealand.
12 votes in favor of the proposal of New Zealand.
Thank you. Oman, 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
We have 11 votes with Indonesia and 11 votes against New Zealand.
Thank you. Pakistan, 21 votes. Paraguay, you have 8 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
En contra de Indonesia.
Against New Zealand. But against Indonesia, rather. 8 votes from Paraguay for New Zealand.
Philippines, 8 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia. Poland, 15 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
10 votes against.
10 votes against and
15 votes against, and for New Zealand, 15 votes in favor.
Thank you very much. Poland, 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia. Portugal. You have 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia. And on the proposal by New Zealand. Thank you. Qatar. On the, you have 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
With this, we are with Indonesia. 11.
Yes. I'm sorry, this is not coming through. Can you repeat your votes on the proposal by Indonesia?
We are with Indonesia's proposal. We are in favor. 11 in favor.
11 in favor on the proposal by New Zealand,
Indonesia.
please.
And New Zealand.
11 abstentions. Republic of Korea, 17 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, no. Rwanda, 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia.
10 votes against.
And on the proposal by New Zealand.
10 votes in favor.
Thank you. San Marino, you have 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
10 votes against.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
10 votes in favor.
Thank you. Sao Tome Principe, no. Saudi Arabia, no. Senegal, Seychelles. Seychelles, you have 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Okay, 10.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
10 votes for respecting international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and the territorial integrity.
10 in favor. Sierra Leone, you have 11 votes. South Africa, we move on. South Africa, 17 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia. (17 in favor. On the proposal by New Zealand. 17 against. South Sudan, Spain. Spain, you have 16 votes. Sri Lanka, Suriname, Sweden. Sweden, you have 13 votes.
Suriname here, okay.
On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Yeah, Suriname.
Oh, I'm sorry. Suriname is in the room. Please
Yes,
excuse me, I
Suriname is
can't
in the
see
room.
you from here. One MP. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
5-4, 5 abstention.
5-4, 5 abstention. And on the proposal by New Zealand?
7-4, 3 abstention.
7-4, 3 abstention.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sweden, 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
13 against.
Proposal by New Zealand?
13 in favor.
Thank you. Switzerland, 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
12 votes against.
Proposal by New Zealand?
12 votes in favor.
Thank you. Syria? Syria, you have 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
13 votes with the Indonesian proposal and 13 votes against New Zealand's proposal.
Noted. Thank you. Thailand, 18 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
18 votes in favor for Indonesian proposal, and for New Zealand proposal, abstention.
Abstention on the proposal by New Zealand. Timor-Leste. Togo. Turkey. 19 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
For Indonesian proposal, 9 in favor, 10 abstention. And for the New Zealand proposal, 19 in favor.
Are there 2 MPs in the room? Okay. Noted. Thank you. We go back to Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste, you have 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Indonesia, 7 against. 7 vote in favor of New Zealand proposal and 4 against.
Okay. And on the proposal by New Zealand?
7 vote in favor of New Zealand proposal and 4 votes against.
The same thing, 7 and 4. Just so that my colleagues are 100% clear, for the first proposal on Indonesia, can you please repeat your vote?
4 vote in favor of Indonesian proposal, 7 against.
Noted. Thank you. Uganda. We move on to the last page. United Arab Emirates, you have 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
11 in favor.
And proposal by New Zealand?
Against, 11.
Thank you. United Kingdom, 18 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
18 votes against Indonesia.
And proposal by New Zealand?
18 votes in favor of New Zealand.
Thank you. Tanzania, 17 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
Proposal by Indonesia, 17 votes in favor.
And
proposal by New Zealand, 17 votes abstention.
Thank you. Uruguay, 10 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
Uruguay, 10 votos.
10 votes against Indonesia.
By New Zealand.
10 votos.
10 votes in favour of New Zealand.
Thank you. Uzbekistan, Vietnam, you have 19 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
19 votes in favor of Indonesia and 19 votes abstentions for New Zealand proposal.
Thank you. Yemen, 11 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
Yemen, 11 votes supporting the Indonesian proposal, and Yemen, 11 votes against the New Zealand proposal.
Noted. Thank you. Zambia, 13 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
On Indonesia, 3 votes in favor, 3 votes in favor, and the other 10 New Zealand, for New Zealand.
My colleague will explain. For each proposal, please, we will need to cast the full allocation of votes. So 13 votes to be cast on the proposal by Indonesia.
On Indonesia, 3 votes in favor, 10 abstention.
3 in favor, 10 abstention. And on the proposal by New Zealand?
New Zealand, 10 in favor, 3 abstention.
10 in favor, 3 abstentions. Thank you. Zimbabwe, you have 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Thank you. 13 in favor of Indonesia.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
13 against.
Thank you. Afghanistan, Algeria. Algeria, vous avez 16 votes. Pour la proposition d'Indonésie, s'il vous plaît.
For the Indonesian proposal, please.
We have 16 votes in favor of the Indonesian proposal. 16 votes in favor of Indonesia's proposal.
16 in favor, and on the proposal by New Zealand?
As for New Zealand's proposal, we have 16 votes of abstention.
16 abstention. Thank you. Andorra, you have 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
10 votes pour la proposition de l'Indonésie.
10 votes for Indonesia and 10 votes against Indonesia's proposal and 10 votes for New Zealand. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. Angola, you have 14 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
Angola, 14 in favor.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
14 abstention.
14 abstention. Armenia, 11 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
In favor.
For goodness sake,
favor.
excuse me, madam. Sorry.
Thank you. In favor.
11 in favor of the proposal by Indonesia, and on the proposal by New Zealand, please.
Abstention.
11 abstention. Australia, 14 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
14 votes against the Indonesian proposal.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
14 votes in favour.
Thank you. Austria, 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
12 votes against.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
12 votes in favour.
Bahrain, 11 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
11 in favour.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
11 against.
Bangladesh, 20 votes. Belarus, 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
13 votes in favour of Indonesia.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
13 votes against New Zealand.
Noted. Belgium, 13 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
13 votes against the proposal of Indonesia.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
13 votes in favor of the proposal of New Zealand.
Thank you. Benin, vous avez 12 voix pour la proposition de...
So Benin, you have 10 voices for the proposal of Indonesia.
Of Benin. We move on to Bolivia. 12 votes on the proposal by, no, Botswana.
Yes?
Yes, we have Botswana in the room. You have 11 votes. On the proposal, please, by Indonesia.
10 against.
You have 11 votes. Is there only one MP?
11.
Yes, okay.
11 against.
So, I'm sorry, my apologies. As there is only one delegate, you are entitled to 10 votes. 10 votes.
No, we are not one. I mean.
There are 2 MPs in the room. Okay, so then you have 11 votes. We repeat, 11 votes, please, on the proposal by Indonesia.
11 against.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
11 in favor.
Thank you. Bulgaria, 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia?
10 votes against and 10 votes in favor of the proposal of New Zealand. Thank you.
Noted, thank you. Cabo Verde, 10 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
10 votes in the in abstention of proposal Indonesia's proposal. 10 votes in favor of New Zealand proposal.
Thank you. Cambodia, 11 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
Cambodia, 11 votes in favor for Indonesia proposal and abstention for New Zealand proposal.
Okay, 11 abstention on the proposal by New Zealand. Cameroon, Chad, Chile, 13 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
13 votos en contra.
13 votes against Indonesia.
New Zealand.
Y
13 votes in favor of New Zealand.
China, 23 votes on the proposal by Indonesia, please.
23 votes in favor.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
23 votes abstention.
Thank you. Croatia. Croatia, you have 10 votes on the proposal by Indonesia.
Against the proposal of Indonesia.
10 against. And on the proposal by New Zealand?
4 in
10
favor.
In favor. Thank you. Now, we've gone through the room. I understand there are a few delegations that have not voted yet. Malawi. Is Malawi now in the room? Yes, Malawi, you have one delegate in the room. You are entitled to 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please. Just a moment, we're bringing a microphone. In Senegal.
Thank you. On the proposal for Indonesia, against?
10 against, and on the proposal by New Zealand?
10 in favor.
Noted, thank you. Then I understand we have Jordan, which has not voted. Jordan, you have 2 delegates in the room. You are entitled to 12 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, please.
According to Indonesia's suggestion,
12 in favor.
We have 12 votes in favor.
And on the proposal by New Zealand?
According to New Zealand suggestion, abstention.
On the proposal by New Zealand, 12 abstention. And I believe, thank you. And I believe we have Senegal, 1 delegate in the room. You are entitled to 10 votes. On the proposal by Indonesia, la proposition.
For the Indonesian proposal. Thank you. The interpreter has no sound.
Against the proposal by New Zealand. I understand we have Australia.
Yes, there's actually only 1 delegate in the room at the moment.
Okay,
so just to be clear, 10 against Indonesia and 10 in favour of New Zealand.
Thank you very much. So for Australia, we have a correction. There is 1 delegate in the room, 10 votes against Indonesia, and 10 votes in favor of the proposal by New Zealand. Thank you. And for my colleagues and for the record, we are also making a correction to the vote by China. I understand there are 2 delegates in the room, therefore entitled to 20 votes. So we replace the 23 with 20. 23 in favor and 20 in favor and 10 abstentions. Is there any other delegation which has not yet voted? Okay, it appears, Mr. President, that all delegations have voted and the voting can therefore be considered as closed.
Thank you, Ambassador Philip. So we now close the votes and we wait a few seconds to obtain the result. Martin, we are waiting. You can explain the procedure to the draft committee. Yes. Yes, of course, but then people will. I will give the floor to the Secretary General in this, because we are waiting the votes, a few seconds or a few minutes, but it's better to wait. Assuming that one will be approved, I will ask the Secretary General to explain how will be the procedure of the draft committee of the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you say, assuming that there will be an emergency item, hopefully, the procedure is as follows. Tomorrow there will be a general debate on this emergency item in this same room from 9 to 10:30, during which the various delegations will have the opportunity to speak to that emergency item, as is always the case. And then the Assembly will strike a drafting committee according to the normal process. That is, the geopolitical groups will be entitled to nominate candidates for a drafting committee that will then meet in the afternoon of tomorrow to prepare a draft resolution on the basis of the one that will have been approved by you as the emergency item. The finalized draft of the emergency item of the resolution will then be tabled before the Assembly during a session on Wednesday dedicated to the adoption of the resolution on the emergency item. And the normal process for adopting the resolution, any resolution in the Assembly, will apply in this particular case. I hope that is clear, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I have the votes already. So, dear colleagues, the proposal presented by Indonesia, positive votes 376, negative votes 472 against, abstentions 162. So, more negative than positive, the proposal was rejected. Propose B from New Zealand. Positive votes 588. Negative votes 177. Abstentions 245. Total yes and no. Please be careful because it's necessary two thirds. Total yes and no 765 votes. Two thirds means 510. Positive more than two thirds was approved. So we have one emergency item approved, the proposal of New Zealand. So, dear colleagues, the proposal was approved and the debate will happen tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. 3 minutes for each intervention. And please be here at that time. We need to begin on time. And if this is emergency item, it's important to have the participation of so many of you as possible. So I will close our work for today. See you tomorrow.